Yep.
It had to come down.
We are about to begin the board meeting, so I'll let you know when you're on, okay?
So you need to make a real clear flag post in the and just say, we're done. That's that quarter. It's about 3 months. And now we're in
business stuff. It's like not so great.
Yeah. I went in for my normal 6 months, and it was 8 months. That's a great question. It doesn't help when you have a 3-hour thing.
Not you do.
Yeah.
So it's
Is that last time we were
When
down?
Dave gets there, we'll start.
People like to run around and sweat, so it's cold or it's wrong.
It's not what you use in your physical.
Well, sure wasn't working on the floor.
The gym is not, that's by the boiler.
Yeah, but as I understand it, for some reason the new is not putting out any heat. I'm not sure. I haven't had a good conversation with them. I'm just on the last Friday afternoon, actually.
No. It's cold here. It's not,
Yeah.
it's hot right now.
Yeah, they actually came and told us. So I went down there Friday afternoon and found that it was.
That cold for us, it's not there yet.
Oh, I saw it.
There we go.
Oh!
Okay.
I did fall again last night. No.
Yeah, I know.
I stepped on a
You
dog
don't go back to the beginning.
and Steve. Oh, a dog, not a dog. Steve screamed.
Your name are 6 years.
And I was like, okay, well, I'm okay. And I was like, you can't do that! And I went, okay. I literally just took a step and she moved under my foot. There was nothing I could do. You have to be more careful. Oh, okay.
Here comes Mr. Mathis.
I'll be as careful as I can be.
And Mr. Mathis.
It's my last time out for about a week or so. This week, 20 inches of snow.
Yeah.
Hey, we are streaming this.
That's okay, I just want to get the weather for you.
Okay, it's 6:33, and so I'll call this meeting to order. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the Union City Community Schools Board meeting. Our meeting agenda is available for you to follow. The expectation for our board meeting is to follow this agenda closely. We operate under the Open Meetings Act and utilize Robert's Rule of Order to govern our discussion and decision-making process. There is an opportunity for public comment during our set agenda. We welcome the public to express their opinions during this time of our agenda. If there are questions about the agenda or the board meeting process, please seek out one of the board members for clarification. Is there any addition or deletion of items to the agenda? Comments from the audience on agenda items. This is the section of the meeting in which the public may make comments or share their opinions about the agenda items. We ask you to limit your comments to no longer than 5 minutes per person to allow others the opportunity to speak. This is the opportunity for the board to listen to your concerns. It is not board practice to act on concerns voiced during this meeting to allow for the board to do further research. Do we have any public comment tonight? Seeing none, let us move on to the presentation. Michael Livendale from Performance Services will be presenting via Zoom on the building and site project.
Michael, can you hear me? Michael? Hello?
Chris?
Yeah,
There you go. Okay, you can hear me now clearly?
yes.
If I need to speak up, just let me know. Sorry, everybody, I apologize. We're on a company trip, so I have, if you can't hear me, just please speak up, but I appreciate you all doing this special meeting. On the phone, we have the whole team again, Bob Weedy, myself, Kevin, George, Christine, and Greg. And what we wanted to talk to you tonight about was how to get the project moving forward, so that the last time we spoke about some timelines where we're going to try to do completion by this summer. And we feel if we move quickly after tonight that we can hopefully still make those timelines. I mean, we live in a time right now where the market changes frequently, but I think we're in decent shape, and we've done quite a bit of work just to get to here. So what I'd like to talk about with this presentation is what are the steps to keep this moving and some of the steps that we'll have in the future, okay? So first and foremost, what we're going to focus on tonight is rebuilding the home stands at the stadium and adding in restrooms over there as we discussed last time. Updating HVAC at the middle school and the high school, and the option for air conditioning we're going to keep aside for now, but we'll still give you that budget-wise in case we have room in the budget. You know, the existing stadium, not much of a surprise. You know, this is the photos we showed you last time, and I'm sure after we get the 20 inches of snow on the day I'm supposed to land, we're supposed to come home Wednesday, so after we get that snow, freeze, and melt, you know, the stadium's going to be taking a beat. So, you know, clearly our energy is going to be spent to move this along a little quicker than we develop a lot of projects to try to get this still done in summer and completed before football season at the end of August. If you guys remember last time, here was the bleacher design that we were showing. It was
Michael,
handicap. Yeah.
let me interrupt you, okay? You showed this to our subcommittee, so 3 of our members have seen this. For 3 of them, they haven't seen these drawings before.
And we have members
Thank
of
you,
the
Chris.
public here as well, which we did not
In the
before.
public here as well, so.
Okay. So I apologize. So let me just go through this real quick. So obviously with your existing bleacher system, you can see in this bottom left, you know, picture, the biggest problem is the earth is coming through the retaining walls that were built to hold the seating, and the cement is cracking badly. So basically the hill is doing what hills do, and it's sliding downhill, and it's corrupting your entire system and causing, you know, not only the seats to be uneven, but now it's starting to break up the cement, and worse yet, the retaining walls just aren't simply able to retain that dirt anymore. So to address this, the architect team, working with the committee and then also Chris and some of us here, what we've come up with is optional designs. But the real key design that we have to address is, you know, we now have to bring the stands up to ADA compliance. So in this screen, what you see on the top left there is at the very top there, you can see some straight lines and then some X's. I'm going to try to run my cursor over them real quick here. So these X's, so this is dedicated seating for handicap, wheelchair, accessible type seating. And then there's companion seating next to it. Now, what this means is the stands will meet ADA requirements, but that seating may not be full at all times, and it's more than welcome to be used by the public. From what I understand, a lot of people tend to sit up there anyway, and they certainly wouldn't be prohibited from sitting there. And then some of the other things that we have to address, and you can kind of see it right over here. This is 11.5 inches that we have to raise the cement up behind the bleacher in this area here. So this area here, this slope I'm demonstrating to you right now is very dangerous and wouldn't meet current ADA compliance. So we're going to raise up this area. We're going to try to reuse some of the existing drainage off to the sides, but we'll have to redo all the drainage back here and do quite a bit of work to lift this up by almost a full foot. So there's a good amount of excavating. The good news is the new bleachers will have the same clearances from the seat for your feet to the next row of bleachers that you currently have. Even being ADA compliant, you'll only need 3 rows of bleachers. They'll have railings on both sides. And then what we intend to do is have a cement bleacher underneath. This would all be full-formed cement. And then the bleachers would be on an L bracket and an aluminum seat on top. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Okay, good. So here's just kind of an easier rendering of what the bleachers would look like. So you can see there's that railing up above. Behind that is the disabled person seating. Here's the railings that meet new codes. Everything's a little bit wider in here. You still have, again, the same heights and clearances on the bleacher seats and the clearance in front of them that you currently have. And then the stairs to meet ADA compliance would come all the way down to track level. And then there's some other work that would have to be done. Here's an aerial shot. You can see we're going to address this entire area here. And in this shot, we have a restroom over in this corner. We're looking at cost and budgets to estimate to move the restroom over to the left. We're trying, either way, we're trying to put the restroom in the most economic place. So one of the things that came up, when we redo these bleachers, we have to have a certain count for restrooms and restroom stalls. And it's quite a bit higher than what you currently have out there. You essentially have, I think, 2 stalls for the females currently, maybe 2 for the men, and a trench type urinal system, which just isn't, compliant in today's codes. So, Greg, if you could real quick, could you recap that? Because we're going to use, if we count the bathrooms at the high school, which are accessible, and the existing bathrooms in the stadium box, we're still short a few bathrooms, and we need to add stalls for women, and we need to add a unisex bathroom. Now, we don't want to, and that's to meet ADA code, but we also will add in a men's restroom so that, the men don't feel left out with this new bathroom, just to try to keep it even. So in this case right here, what we're showing is a men's bathroom here on the left with a single sink and then a urinal sink. As I move up right here in the cursor, this is a unisex or family bathroom. This here is a janitorial closet with a wash sink that is required also by code. These are filling stations for water, also required by code. And then this would be the women's bathroom, which will now get the amount of women accessible bathrooms up to legal code. And of course, this entire building would be ADA compliant. Greg, is there anything I missed in that? It's kind of a quicker recap than the detail you gave last time.
I'd say that's all correct. The family restroom is required for an assembly occupancy, which is what the grandstand is.
Right, so there's a formula to the size of your stands and the possible seating to the amount of available restrooms. And what we've done here is we've used your existing restrooms at the press box at the high school, but we're still short. So in order for us to redo the field, we would have to add on this bathroom also.
Correct. And the travel distance is limited to 500 feet from the seating to the restrooms. But there are banks of restrooms in the school that are within 500 feet travel distance.
Thanks, Greg. Does anybody have any questions on that? Because that is a big part of this of the stadium project.
The school have to be open-ended games.
It has to, yes. In order for us to meet code.
That would not be a problem as far as vandalism or anything in the school.
Well, we would have to make arrangements to make sure that we have, but normally that door blade is open and
The gates are down.
we don't have gates anymore. The
Gates
gates,
have changed since 2000.
the gates had to be removed by code a while ago.
So they could use the whole school.
Yeah, and the door has been open because we had students in and out all the time. So
Don't foresee any problems with that.
we haven't had any so far, so now I know. I think most people will just use the bathrooms. If we have these, most people will use those.
Does this building have to be heated?
Did you hear that question? Does it have to be heated?
We do need to provide some supplemental heat. We did have that custodial closet where we would have a water heater so that you can have hot water. Typically, a building like this would be shut down and locked up and winterized over the winter months. But we would expect to have some kind of supplemental heat in there to prevent the pipes from freezing and so forth.
Any other questions on?
And we have adequate access to septic, et cetera, you can put it that for this facility?
Did you hear that question?
Yes, I'm sorry, yeah. So that's, right now, we're working on it on location-wise. We know where the septic and the water come in over there. We just want to make sure that we locate this in the correct position where it's as efficient as possible, and we don't interrupt, water pressure or something out somewhere else. And obviously, the closer we get to the existing lines, the less money we have to spend on the construction to reach those lines. So that's why we were originally looking at it on the far side, but now we're thinking about trying to locate it over by the handicap side, but we're still investigating that. We've got some soil sampling out at the stadium. We did actual a survey so that we had the correct heights and for the design of the bleachers and everything. We just need to finalize a couple more things with the bathroom, and we anticipate being able to have that done within the next 30 days.
I don't know if you want opinions, but I will say that I think most people here would prefer to put those on the west side of the press box, not the east side, because the east side is utilized for other things during football games, et cetera.
That's good input, thank you. And as it looks right now, it might not be, a noticeable cost, shall we say. We're trying to be very conservative with costs right now on what we present to you tonight. We're going to present some budgets here in a minute, and I'll explain what we did on that, okay? Any other questions?
I'm not seeing any.
Okay, thanks, Chris. All right, anyway, so we would have to go on a pretty aggressive schedule to try to get this done by this summer, and we hope we can hit it. I mean, the bidding environment has been pretty different for the last 18 months. COVID is still impacting things. Unfortunately, COVID is still throwing kind of a wrinkle into things that we honestly didn't plan on experiencing this year. But Whiteman, who's the architect team that Performance Services is working with on this project, and we've worked with Whiteman on several projects. Fortunately for us, they're also working on another, almost a very similar project to this right now, and we're able to, kind of cross over some information. We're moving as quick as we can with designs, and we're still going to explore options. I mean, ideally, and what we're going to come up with is we're certainly going to have a firm cement base all the way down. So the key is now, is it more cost effective that we have that prefabricated, or if we make it on site? There's some things that we're still exploring, and we plan on giving you additional options in the future for cost. And we certainly want to make sure that we value engineer this as much as possible. So there's still a good amount of design that needs to be done moving forward here in the month of February and March, and then working with final review of you all and final cost estimates, and then getting the bid packages out and starting the work really quite quickly in June, and getting the excavation work done, the cement put in. We have a little bit of a concern about the lead time on the aluminum bleacher seats themselves. I would say right now, we don't know exactly if we're in trouble yet. We feel right now we'd be okay to get those aluminum bleachers sent to us for the seating by the end of August. But if anything got delayed, it would be the aluminum. We're not worried about the cement and the rest of the structural issues getting delayed. But you could use these bleachers perhaps without the aluminum seating. Again, we'll have a better idea of that. By the time we come back to you for final design approvals in March, we'll have a really good idea of the exact timeline on this. But needless to say, I mean, everyone that is involved in this project understands that it's a priority, and the importance is obviously to have it done prior to football season. Where we're at right now is budget, and Chris and I talked about this, and we want to make sure that, you know, budgeting estimates in this environment are difficult. So we try to be as conservative as possible for this. We're carrying right now about a 10% contingency and also a 10% price escalation in these numbers. And if we're able to execute the project this summer, we should be fairly safe. So we're estimating for the site development and creation of the bleachers, upgrading some of that cement area at the top there, upgrading the entrance. The cement would be upgraded all the way from the gated entrance all around the press box. You know, there's just to get all those levels and those angles correct to make sure that they're to ADA code and nothing's dangerous. We'd have to add in some railings and things like that. But we're estimating 1.1 to 1.2 million would be the cost for that. And then for the bathrooms, and again, I hope this is at the high end, but about 350,000 for the additional bathrooms on the site. Any questions on this number?
Do the bathrooms have to be permanent structures?
Yes. Yeah, and that's, you know, that again goes back to the ADA code. So, you know, once you upgrade these bleachers, everything in that facility has to come up to code. And right now, quite frankly, you know what I mean, nothing's to code. Your current bathrooms, as a matter of fact, aren't even up to code because the cement is a couple inches lower than the door thresholds. So, you know what I mean, you gotta raise that cement up too. So it's just a lot, you know, it's kind of that story. We say it a lot as a contractor. When we touch it, it's gotta come out to code. And there's a cost for that in today's world.
This includes raising that concrete so that it's up to those floor levels, right?
Yes, so this includes, you can see here in this white area, all this is all new concrete and leveling and work that would be done to that entire area. So like I said, as you come in from your existing main entrance, it would all be up to code, you know, everything, the retaining wall, that's where you currently have your rock, everything will be addressed up in that area to make sure that it's correct.
Those would be steps there now, right? Instead of that steep.
Yeah, that's far too steep of an entrance over there. Just like over here in front of the press box, it's far too steep right now. We'll raise that up a foot to get that, to make sure that, you know, there's no code violations here. And Greg can probably explain this in a little bit more detail, but, you know, again, you know, there's a formula for all of this, and we're making sure that you guys adhere to that, and you have you know, you're up to the latest in the ADA codes, and also we're being as efficient as we can. You know what I mean? We don't want to waste any space. We don't, you know, the good news is we're going to reuse your existing bathrooms as count, even though they're not handicap accessible, they still count as bathrooms for the overall population that this place could see. And then this bathroom will be 100% handicap accessible at all levels.
I have a question. I'm not good at construction, but I think ahead, just in case they didn't have the bleachers ready for the football season. We play our games, home games away. Would that be how we solve that? Or there's no bleachers. You don't bring lawn chairs, or you have to play away, right?
We would certainly.
Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
He's asking what would happen if, for some reason, you did not get it finished in time for our home games to start the season. And what I was going to say is that, from what you've said, it sounded to me like doing the concrete wouldn't be an issue.
The bleachers.
Right, so so our only concern, and this is just because, you know, lead times in this country for a lot of things are very unpredictable now, and unfortunately change all the time. I mean, if you guys have been to the grocery store lately, it's actually noticeable now. It's rather shocking. But as you can see here from this bleacher design, you can almost see these little L brackets in the seats, right? So the seats are aluminum, the L brackets are lagged into the cement. Without the seats there, we would have to make some safety precautions that those brackets couldn't hurt anybody and pad them off, but you would still have almost a 3-foot area where you could put a lawn chair or, you know, some other sort of seat. We hope it doesn't come to that, and when we come back to you before we bid these projects, we hope to have about a 90% certainty on all of this. You know what I mean? We'll have this locked down. As we move forward with you all, we'll actually be talking about perhaps purchasing some of the items with longer lead times before we're done completely with design and some of the other things. No matter what, I know I'm gonna have aluminum benches extra amount of feet long. So if we need to order those early, we'll try to get that designed out in order as soon as possible.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And then, I mean, honestly, if it gets to a point here where like, let's say we're in the month of late February or March, and we don't feel like this is something that could be executed next summer, or we, you know, all of a sudden we get some different feedback on the aluminum, we'll have that discussion with you immediately and see if there's anything that we can do. You know, in that case, it might be, let's leave the L brackets off altogether, or maybe we use the L brackets and put wood in there temporarily to get you through the season. You know, obviously this place has a lot of use, and even this summer, I mean, I feel bad that we'd be disrupting the things you do for 4th of July and seating up there, but you know, we're gonna need the full summer to really get this done properly.
Another question for you, Mike. I know it's difficult, and we had a discussion about this earlier about how it's impossible to predict how long it will last, but if someone in the community asks us, you know, this big investment, how long do you think these bleachers will hold up? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think we would, if you were to talk to the cement man, the people who would do the actual cement work, they would tell you that this is 20 to 30 years. Greg, you were giving me a number the other day. What were you saying on that? And remember, Greg is the lead architect on this, and as opposed to, you know, a contractor like myself, Greg is highly conservative. I tend to be like, hey, we're gonna get this done if I have to hit you with a hammer. But Greg, what would you say on that?
Yeah, the concrete should last for decades. We're following the recommendations that were in the original geotechnical report. We're completely removing all of the soil, unsuitable soil, topsoil, and putting in compacted fill, and the concrete stuff should last for decades. Yes, we're improving the drainage, so there's no reason that they shouldn't last for several decades.
In this case too, I should go back to this. This would sit on piers. So this whole bleacher structure is not sitting on the ground, even though it's cement. So the good news with that is, right, the ground's not pushing against the bleachers themselves. And then we have air, space, gravel, and drainage under here. So overall, it should have a pretty healthy lifetime.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the footings will be below frost depth.
All right,
Yeah. And as you guys know, you have 30-year equipment in your high school right now that's supposed to last 15 years, and it's 30 or 40 years old. So, I mean, as a school, I think you'll get a very long use out of this, and you won't run into the kind of annual failure problem that you currently have.
Well, when are the current bleachers?
I know
90s?
in my time here, they've been worked on, I think, 3 different times, major projects. The last one was probably in the late 90s.
Yeah.
They didn't do the drainage.
And I mean, what you guys have,
We still got 20 years out of it, so, and it was done,
right,
homemade sounds rude, but,
Right.
well, I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
We didn't hire an
yeah,
engineering
it,
coordinator.
thank you. I mean, it's, again, we don't want to overestimate this, but I mean, this is a cement structure. I mean, I go to football games nearby in Oakland County where I live now. I originally grew up in Shrewsbury, Augusta. We still have the same football field at Galesburg, or bleachers at Galesburg Augusta, by the way, that they had around at the school, they have maintained before. So, I mean, once they're not, you know, in your case, what's hurting your bleachers is this. This is a wall trying to hold back dirt. And you can't hold back the pressure of dirt every year in Michigan when it freezes, and then you know, obviously you have a lot of water issues here. So we expect a lot along that journey. I mean, I can't, you know, again, I don't want to promise this, but you can go downtown Detroit by the Fist. There's the amphitheater there. The cement seats at the amphitheater in Detroit, which are rooted in the ground, are currently 50 years old. I know because I audited for the city. Thank you. I hope we answered your question. You know, we hate to answer without answering definitively, but these are certainly more than 30 years.
Thanks.
Okay, and so that's the stadium part of what we're talking about today. And then we've also been looking at the school facilities to utilize some of your ESSER funds and to do some HVAC upgrades. So over at the schools, what we came up with were some of the beneficial upgrades. Chris, you would have to have that improvement list printed, would you? I'm sorry, I should have had you do that.
I do not have the entire list right now.
Okay. So we focused on a couple different things at both the middle school, separate from the high school. And let me just talk about the middle school first. At the middle school, we were doing HVAC and mostly ventilation upgrades. So this was to replace the existing unit ventilators that you all have over there, as well as add in forced air ventilation. So the middle school, with its very small windows right now, has high CO2 numbers, and it doesn't have forced air ventilation. When it was built to have windows open and cross breezes, and of course back then, CO2 levels weren't expected to be what they are today. So there's actually recommended CO2 levels for education that create an ideal learning environment. If you have the proper amount of fresh oxygen in the room, the theory is the children shouldn't be as tired. It even gets down to elementary children have a higher respiratory rate, higher heart rate than high school children. So we have different CO2 codes when we're building an elementary, a middle school, and a high school. So what we looked at over there, one of the most efficient things you can do is, first off, your unit ventilators need to be replaced, and we need to do some new control systems, and add in a lot of extra, redo some piping. There would be replacing these unit ventilators. We would now put in what's a stand-up unit ventilator, so we'd have to do some paint and fix the walls and patch them. But you have a unit ventilator now that's more efficient, has a longer life cycle, it kind of has less moving parts, and will provide you better heat at the building. And they would have an option in the future if you wanted to add air conditioning to them. At this moment, we're not, but if maybe budgets allow later, we could add in air conditioning down the road. The important thing that we thought over both the high school and the middle school, that if we picked up forced air ventilation where we were actively bringing air in and out of the building, you could now use, morning air to cool the building down, mix that with your heat, and in the afternoon, you're still taking in, say, fresh air around 11, you could deal with when it gets a little bit hotter in the afternoon, say on a spring day, or vice versa in a fall day. And you would also have much better air quality at that building. And we think that in itself might help you feel a little bit more comfortable not having air conditioning. We're not going to say that's going to solve it, but air conditioning in Michigan, it depends on we're moving our school years around. Some people are starting earlier and earlier in August. So air conditioning is becoming a bigger issue for school boards to address in Michigan. But we think by addressing this right now, we would take care of the critical infrastructure upgrades over at the middle school, give it a more solid foundation for heating, and really to use natural air to cool the building better, but more importantly, ventilate the building better, which will offset some of the humidity and heat problems that you do have. And you may hear the term like a shoulder month, in those months where it's both cold and hot in the day, or if the sun comes out, it can impact the building. So the cost for that right now, we have budgeted about $992,000, and that work would also be completed by the end of August, with some of it major construction for all of this. We're talking on the mechanical. We plan on being able to do by the end of August. We're going to do some things at night in September, but we would have thing ready before heating season in October. And you can see over at the high school, same thing. We don't have any sort of forced air ventilation where you can run fans and exchange the air in that building. The high school does have much better windows. Don't get me wrong, those are great windows. And so the high school generally does feel cooler than the middle school. We've been in your building in the spring and in the summer. And when you open the windows at the high school, it does make a difference. But by upgrading the ventilation over there, we can also give you, that strength where you don't have to open windows in the classrooms and hope it bleeds into the hallways. We're holding out to some options where we might air condition the gyms, but this is the budget we wanted to present to you right now. And if these budgets come in, because they're conservative too, if we end up coming in a little bit lower, at Jonesville just recently on a $1.5 million budget, we came in $100K lower after bids, and we were thrilled. And so they added in some extra air conditioning to one of their buildings. So today, all we're trying to do is give you enough information to be conservative and move forward. Just please keep that in mind. The other thing at the high school, and the big project at the high school, is your piping. So both your hydronic and domestic piping, and that's the hydronics and piping that you use to heat the building. Domestic is simply the piping for your hot water and cold water, is under the slab of the high school. And this was typical when your high school was constructed. Unfortunately, after 30 years, those pipes start to break, rust, deteriorate. There's a lot of issues going on. You've got chemicals between the concrete. You've got, dirt impacting it. You've got the movement of the building over 30 plus years impacting it. And you have had some leaks with that system. And unfortunately, too, because the system is again, under the foundation, sometimes it leaks and you don't know it. So I don't know if you guys remember, there was an article about 2 years ago this occurred in Ann Arbor. They actually lost one of their elementaries because the system leaked for so long, it created a big pond of water underneath, which froze and lifted the building up 11 inches and cracked the entire slab. I'm not saying that could happen here, but that is the worst case scenario. So those pipes are way beyond age. The new pipes we would run in the ceiling, we would have to replace some ceiling tiles, running down the hallways and branching out into the rooms. But it's a pretty significant project. And the good news is we do feel very comfortable that we could complete the majority of that work before August. And then that would also tie into your steam heating and cooling system and the domestic water system. So that's a big project. And I think it's something that's fairly critical for you all right now. Chris, did you want to say anything on that addition? You've been dealing with some of the leaks.
No, I think you pretty well covered it. I think it's something that I know has been talked about over the last many years here at different times, and it kind of keeps getting pushed down, and so we're definitely going to have to consider it, because if you don't do it, I guess you're taking a chance that you're not going to have a problem.
We've already had problems. We had a problem in our gym, we had a problem in the science lab. Was there a problem in the kitchen too?
Well, right outside the, under the trophy case,
Yeah.
in the entrance there, we had an
It's
issue
already
several years ago. So it's definitely something that has to be seriously considered.
Does anybody have any questions on any of this? Thank you. Like I said, in those numbers, it's 2.3 million. You have some pretty significant ESSER dollars you can use to offset these. But what we try to do is address critical infrastructure needs and things that would also impact the learning environment the most. So we're not going to just upgrade it. We're going to make sure that we're improving your learning environment too. And we'll have numbers to back that up. We'll have numbers to show that, demonstrate the energy savings going forward and the facility savings going forward also.
You don't have enough money for the air conditioners
When the board building and space subcommittee met and looked at these, the air conditioning would be a lower priority. It's something we could consider, but it'd be in our current sinking fund, we would not really be able to afford all of it.
But doing this, from what I heard correctly, is setting us up for future possibility. Like basically.
Right.
Have this is the appropriate
It will
ventilation
add-
system and everything.
What it will do is it will put AC units, right now the AC units over the media center and the cafeteria and the kitchen in the middle school do not work. Those had air conditioning units, but none of them are functioning. So this would replace those units. So you would have cool air in the building, in the cafeteria and the media center, as well as the kitchen. And then with the ventilation added in the roof, it would circulate air in the building better. And the belief is that that would help lower the temperature to make it tolerable. We had a 1 week this last year where it was really rough. We had the one day where we went home early because it got too hot. But at least this would provide areas of the building that would be cool, and it probably significantly, maybe not significantly, but it would decrease the temperature everywhere by doing this much. And then we're in a position where if we can afford to, we can go back and add the air conditioning in at a later date.
Well, they said with the system, it can help with humidity issues and all that. And
Right.
So just moving air in and out is way better than what it is over there. I've been over
It's
for-
just dead.
Yeah, for like open houses, I've been over there, and yeah, it's just stagnant air, so.
Just for the record, the ballpark number they gave the building site committee was like 2.2 million for that air conditioning.
All buildings.
So it makes this even more expensive, right?
Hey, go ahead, Mike.
So where do we go? Oh, yeah, so the next question would be, where do we go from here? So this gets a little confusing because we're kind of have three projects and they all interact. Obviously, the priority as we look at it with you all is the football and the stadium project. And so those numbers can determine whether or not you add in air conditioning, say at the high school gym or somewhere else, you know what I mean, where we maybe don't air condition the whole building, but we try to put it in certain spots and then give you more flexibility in rotating students around. And, you know, because of the bleed over, it helps the building a little bit. So what we want to do is try to stay, you know, within these budgets right now so that you understand where we're moving forward. For the football field, because there's not extra dollars involved, that's fairly simple. You just do a motion tonight to select Whiteman and then Performance Services, Whiteman as the architect, Performance Services as the CM, and we'll move forward on this schedule to begin finalizing the design and engineering. The real important thing is to get the cost estimating, and that's our thought for value engineering, making sure that, you know, we're building this as efficiently as possible and getting the schedule done. And that's the stuff we want to get done here in February and March so we can bid this job late March, early April, and have that, okay? So motion to approve that would get the two teams from us working, and we would negotiate out the final fees with you. We gave Chris the estimated fees that are fairly standard for projects. The football field requires a little extra work because you have site, civil, you just have all the kind of architectural needs in that. So it'll take a little bit more work, but we'll be able to get you there. And what we really want to do is be able to come back in March with a very firm budget, very firm design, you know, right down to what day the seating will come and how that'll all work out and have that finalized. So what we're asking tonight, if we do that, that can get us moving in that direction. For the mechanical project, we don't want to complicate it, but what we are trying to do is separate it, where we do it, where we have a contract where we do the middle school utilizing the ESSER dollars, and we separate that from a contract for the high school not using ESSER dollars. So when we use ESSER dollars, we're required to use the Bacon-Davis wages, which is essentially a union wage written up by the federal government. So it's in Michigan, we have very high union wages. If you were in Indiana, Davis-Bacon is higher than an Indiana union wage. In Michigan, the Davis-Bacon's about 70% of the time, Michigan wages, union wages are higher. But that eliminates a lot of smaller local contractors who aren't union. We'll give everybody the opportunity to bid this, certainly that's local, but it's difficult when you haven't done union work before, you haven't done Davis-Bacon work before, you haven't had certified payrolls, things like that, to do that. So if we split these two contracts up, we could conceivably design things specifically where a local contractor could be utilized. And we also lower the cost at the high school. Does that make sense, Kevin? Everybody?
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so we gave Chris an RFP to use, and if he puts that RFP out, we have it set up right now for Friday the 4th. That would be due on March the 7th. And to respond to that RFP, you have to respond with significant designs on the mechanical, and significant equipment list, significant, efficiencies, life expectancies, warranties, a lot of detailed information. So the RFP is kind of nice because anyone responding to it is actually actively designing it. So even though we wouldn't be allowed to talk to you over the next 4 weeks, we would be actively designing things. And then in March, what we'd ask you to do is award this as a not to exceed contract. So for example, you can simply say, well, if the budget over at the football field is 1.5 and the budget over the school is 2.3, we'll award that as not to exceed, but we're not going to approve anything until you come back with a bid number. And then when we approve the bid subcontracted number, that's when we'll go to the final contract. And then our company will guarantee that we'll have no change order, that no scope will be eliminated. So we'll take on the responsibility of the success of that project. If any of you have been experienced with construction before, particularly in schools, quite often after a contract is bid and awarded, there's a lot of change orders that they blame on design errors, or they blame on it wasn't added into the bid package correctly, things like that. They run into, for example, in the ceilings, they run into a beam where they didn't expect the beam. Our company will assume that risk, and we'll explain that in great detail, obviously, in the RFP response. So the RFP we gave Chris is really quite a bit of work where companies have to say exactly how they'll do things and whether or not they'll promise change orders. We'll also provide you an open book. We'll show you all the costs. We'll show you all the bids we received from contractors. We'll break it out. In the case of my company, we'll purchase the equipment directly so that we don't allow a subcontractor to purchase that equipment and mark it up twice and then, sell it back. So we think doing it this way, we can provide you a better value add and, more importantly, get to construction quicker. Because just like with the bleachers, we'll know the equipment pretty early, and we can place those equipment orders before we're done designing, for example, in the high school, the exact amount of elbows and length of the pipe and hangers and ceiling tiles I have to replace. You don't have to wait for that design to be completed, or we can get moving on some of the equipment orders, because those lead times are pretty long right now. And right now, we wouldn't get mostly the HVAC units for the rooftop repairs over there, or the units for classrooms until late July. So we'd be hustling through August, and then if we weren't able to make the first opening day of school, we would simply do that stuff at night when the facilities were unoccupied. And we also have guarantees on making sure the rooms are clean and well and functioning for the students in the morning. So there's a lot of big parts going on here. These are big numbers, and this is a lot of project work for you all. But I think, the good news is we're very experienced with this. We just did something over at Jonesville, and we got them under budget and on time for construction. We utilize some of the buying power that we have with other schools. For example, for Fort Wayne, we're a $30 million project just to do unit upgrades in their high school. So needless to say, we're able to piggyback our unit vent orders on that thing, and we get a price, quite frankly, I don't think a lot of people can perfectly get. So there's a lot going on, and we're asking you all for a lot. But tonight, if you just, approve moving forward on the bleacher side, approve, allowing Chris to do an RFP, signing that not to exceed order, then what we'll do after the RFP is we'll come back and have more meetings with you, specifically on the mechanical, where we go through the final designs, drawings, engineering, the whole 9 yards, so that you know everything you're getting before you sign an actual contract. Now, say we come back and you decide not to pursue that. So then all we would ask you to do is pay for our engineering cost on the job, and that's approximately 8% of that. Again, in the RFP, we'll put the exact amount of cost, for lost engineering. And we'll engineer some things on our own. you know, because we do hope that some of these things come under budget at the football field or with mechanical, and you have options to do other things. But that we do at risk. The work we've done up to today has been at risk, because we need to give you information to make a decision. So that's a lot, and I know I talk fast. So if anybody has any questions right now, please ask. But the short end of this is, you know, if you guys do a couple of these things, everybody gets moving on what is essentially 3 separate projects.
Anyone have any questions?
So the third project is the HVAC stuff at the high school, or is the piping at the high school?
Yeah, essentially all the work at the high school. Okay, you know, I mean, we're going to try to separate. I want to keep the ESSER dollars as much as possible over at the middle school, because if I mix ESSER dollars if I was to say, you know, using it on a bleacher or somewhere else, right, then the whole project has to become ESSER, and that ups the cost.
I understand. I just didn't know if that third was just the HVAC at high school, or if it included the piping too.
Yeah.
So third project.
Anything else? All right, I think that's it, Michael. Thank you very much.
And I apologize I couldn't be there, guys. This is a big company trip for my company, and it's a working meeting down in Mexico. So I had to be here. You know, it was tough, but these are the things I do for work. Not for that extra mile for you two.
I think we're supposed to feel sorry for it. That's the reason here.
Well, I appreciate you having this meeting. I appreciate you letting me do these things. You know, it's, you know, I mean, doing what we do, we like to be there in person, and we'll always try to be. And obviously, with COVID, we've all gotten used to Zoom, but it's not as good as being in person. But we look forward to seeing you in the future and working really hard to make sure that your goals are reached. And at all times, you'll hear me say that. You know, we're going to try to give you the best value for your dollar, and then help you understand where every dollar went.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. If anyone has any questions, just give them to Chris, and he's not shy about calling me. He'll call me tonight. So if you have any questions, just let me know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Chris.
Appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Or as they say here, buenas noches. Hey, don't.
Oops. Bye, Mexico. All right. Good presentation. So now we move on to action items. This is for the Alumni Field Stadium project. The board needs to approve the hiring of Performance Services Incorporated to serve as construction management services, and Whiteman Incorporated to provide architectural services for the Alumni Field Bleachers project. I will entertain a motion for the same.
So moved.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Aaron. Any discussion?
Just to understand our risk is that we have to pay for the engineering. We haven't actually bought it, you know.
Yeah. That is correct. We've not paid them anything yet for any of the work they've done. And on this project, until we would owe them a certain amount for their engineering work as they develop the plans, etc. But the final dollar amount of the project is something that we can approve, that we can make adjustments to as we go along. So that's just a budget to work with. But we will get to a final amount before you actually vote and approve on things.
Was any of the information, the numbers, I guess, higher than what you think is feasible?
No, I was expecting the budget, expecting the bleachers to come in right about that amount. The bathrooms, I think, cost a little more than I had thought they would cost. But I think that's, if you think about a home, when you build a home, it's always the bathroom and the kitchen are the things that cost the most money. When we work with them, we will be able to as they do the design, we will be able to say, you know, this is too expensive, how can we cut this down, how can we make changes to it? He already told me at one point that we have enough concrete there to have seating for twice as many people. If we put our bleachers together closer like a lot of places do. Now, I happen to think, and I've spoken to a lot of people who believe that that's one of the great things about our bleachers. People love how they are and they have all that space, etc. But, you know, he did say that if you really needed to save money, you could put your seats closer together and then move them in so you wouldn't need to be so wide, etc. But as we go through the project, we can, I would expect the building and site committee to be working with me and them to look at the design as it comes in, and then even through the process of getting the bids, making adjustments where we need to get it to where it's feasible. But I certainly believe we can do it through our sinking fund without problem.
I don't recall what the final number was. Do you? Anybody else recall what they said?
I believe it was 1.2 million, 1.1 or 1.2 million for the bleachers, but they really didn't get in and specify what that meant as far as it was bleachers.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know if it included the bathroom facilities or anything like that.
The leveling, all that leveling of concrete, putting the steps in place of the slope. And I know I've been told of at least one person who fell walking on that slope recently. And then also, I had noticed it, but if you go to the bathrooms, you can't get into them. He didn't mention, but it would also make the concession stand ADA accessible, which right now it isn't. There's no window the windows are too high for someone. So it would correct all of that while leaving our current press box. That was something that we talked about quite a bit.
And we've known this is a problem. I mean, we've been discussing this for 4 years, so I don't want to rush a decision that has a price tag this big, but I also feel like, oh, okay, come on. Like, we know this is a problem. We know the price tag is big. We do need to get moving. We don't want to disrupt football season. I don't want to hash through teeny little pieces of it when we know that this is, I mean, at some point, we're not even going to be insurable. So it's not like, I don't think it's a can we or, should we or shouldn't we?
It's not a safe facility.
Right.
No. I mean, we'll wait for half of them to cave in and just give away those retaining walls.
It's not so much just about football, but band, track, our 4th of July, those
Graduation.
those
That's field days for the elementary school.
Right.
Once in just safety. I mean, look at some of that stuff walking down there and trying to get around the bleachers. You got holes, cracks. You said you don't want people to fall. I think it's just a safety thing as well for the public. So.
But it was important to me in talking to them that we retain kind of the atmosphere or how it looks and appearance that we all love and have gotten used to. So there aren't any big concrete things sticking up in different places. It's going to look very similar to what we have now. The biggest difference will probably be that there's that a little 1 foot wall at the top with the handrail on it that the seating will be from behind, but that's a safety measure that has to be there. Other than that, it should just look like a upgraded version of what we have now.
That'll last for 34 years, so very well.
And it will be nice that the steps on all 3 steps go down to the ground.
Right.
Not to get too far in the weeds, but we did ask about, can we reduce the number of bathrooms, and is there a magic number of seating that would reduce the need for that building? And the answer is no. It's a linear function basically, and you have to have so few seats and look like someone just threw a couple bleachers on the side of the hill, and wouldn't be the same. So there really wasn't any reason to try to reduce a stall or two. Wasn't going to stay the same.
No. Plus, I've been there and seen the line outside the women's restroom. It's not a good situation.
Any other discussion?
But to your point earlier on the porta potties, going to football games in the 80s, there were lots of shady places that we used restrooms, I'm just saying. So I do feel like there's a bit that it builds character. I mean, we're all good people because we, went into places, wood doors and that weren't ADA compliant.
There's a lot of things we discussed, like press boxes, putting everything brand new around it is not kind of funny, but I don't think we can afford a little new press box, the bathrooms are.
I've been thinking about that, and I had already been planning on, if we move forward with this, seeing what we can do to just spruce up the press box itself on the inside and on the outside, if we need to do some painting, whatever we can do, so that it doesn't look like we've got this old building in the middle of all this. So we're gonna look at what we can do with our general fund just to dress it up and maybe replace some carpet, maybe some other things that we can do in order to make it match, be presentable along with the rest of these.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, we discussed the zip line. Have a shot down.
Across the river.
Yeah.
You want to
We
go
can
all the way
so
down.
that you could jump
Charlie,
down.
Charlie, coming down before the game starts. That is not ADA compliant.
One of the things he spoke about before was the press box not being coaches, portion of the press box being ADA accessible. Is that something that we can look into, them possibly giving us a plan to make it?
Yeah, that is, I'm not sure exactly how we would address this. I can talk to them and find out if there is a way to make an entrance that is accessible, but that is a difficulty with our current design because all we have are those steps up to that first level. It's possible down the road we might get a complaint or something like that about that. But the building, as I understand it, as it was built, when it was built, met whatever codes were required at that time. So, then it gets down to the lawyers and those types of things. But unless you want to, try to basically replace the entire press box, which, then you get into a whole host of other issues and costs. Then we have what we have and we'll try to work with it to make it that way. Certainly any work we do around that with the concrete and so on, if there's a way we can address it, we'll try to take care of that.
Any other discussion? Seeing none or hearing none, let's move to a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Motion carries. We then let them know your
Yes.
contact them. Thank you. We'll move on now to discussion items. We will move to discussion of requests for proposal. The district will be seeking proposals to select a contractor to propose and provide improvements to existing facilities. And we'll discuss the timeline and process.
So the way this works with this type of project is I have the RFP, and I've done similar things in working with, for instance, Moss. When we did our networking, they assisted me in coming up with basically ideas what we want, and then we issue an RFP, which any company can bid on. And so we will issue an RFP. We could get bids from other companies besides Performance Services, but they would have to come in and they would have to look at our facilities and propose what they would do in order to improve the situations that we've talked about, the areas that we feel need to be addressed. And all of that is laid out in this RFP that I have ready to post on the state's website, as well as I think there'll be a posting in the local paper. But so we will have a mandatory walkthrough. I think it's the 15th of February, where people who are interested in bidding can come in and get questions answered, and then whatever proposals we get, the building and site committee and I will look at those, and then there'll be a recommendation that will come to the board. And then at that point, we will select a company that we will then work with to design and build whatever they have proposed. You know, because we're selecting a company based on what their proposal is and what their plans would be to address these issues that we have, primarily the airflow, et cetera. So if we, just for example, if we chose performance services, then at that point we would move forward with a contract that was not to exceed a certain amount of money. And once that contract's in place, then we would start to get the actual designs and work with subcontractors on bids and develop the final cost of the project, which would come to the board before it. So any project, nothing will begin until it comes to the board with this is your final cost. And the board can decide what to proceed with, what not to proceed with. If it comes in less than what it might, then we can maybe add things to it. Or, you know, we might decide we need to cut things out of it, depending. But at the same time all of this is going on, we are also still working on our plan for the use of ESSER funds, and I'm still working on the plan for the use of sinking funds. I've got some information about our asphalt conditions, so I know I have a pretty good idea what we need to do there. All of these types of things will be, you know, put into this plan that I'm developing for sinking funds, so that we know approximately what number of our sinking funds we can commit to this project before we make the final decision on it. But if we're going to get anything done this summer, we have to kind of get this ball rolling at the same time. We can't afford to wait until we have that plan. So that's the reason to move forward with the RFP now.
So in February, there will be a walkthrough for companies that want to bid on the project.
Yes.
And probably late February or early March, we make a decision. We have the bids in by now.
The bids are scheduled to be in, I believe, March 7th. It's the first week of March.
Yeah,
So then we can meet after that and make a decision.
Yes.
And like in the regular, and this is just one question to the church, like in the government's the same as the churches, we can choose whatever bid we want, if it's more expensive.
You can, yeah, you'll be able to choose whichever one that you want to choose. That's
Whichever
correct.
company you trust the most.
Exactly, yes.
There's no difference between the private and the public sector.
There's some difference. But you certainly can select the bid that you want to select, but we will need to have criteria on which we base that decision. So we will have to have a rubric to say, you know, these are the things we're looking for. We need to be able to identify how important cost is to us and how important the relationship with that particular contractor is, or that company. So we can identify those factors, and then we have to have the evidence to support the decision that you make. The board can vote however you choose to vote on the bid. But from my standpoint, I'm going to come back and recommend, and working with the building and site committee, to recommend what makes the best overall decision for the district. Most of the time, that's going to come down to price, but not always. If prices are close, then you can look at other factors. So.
Basically the same, and I respect you, the committee being back on recommendation.
We will.
The only concern I have, I guess it's minor, I don't want to say it. In the RFP, it talks a lot about energy savings, and I know that I had asked questions about ventilation. We're going to be venting air outside, so with some heat. Just, I worry that the RFP is so tied into energy savings, and that's not what we're trying to improve ventilation, reduce carbon dioxide, et cetera. So I don't know if those are conflicting or not, I guess.
I think that language has to do with, I will check on that. I think it has to have something to do with state requirements, but let me check on that. I can make, there is a section in there that talks quite a bit about the HVAC systems, et cetera, and I can check on the emphasis on that, make sure that that is brought forward, so that is more the focus.
And even though that I agree with everything you said, I at least want to register the idea that how important air conditioning is, as we opened up earlier. I taught here at a time when we were open up in the middle of August, and it was summer, and room 9 was a real bear, and aside from the teacher being hot, education was really tough. And my wife was at the middle school at the time they were tarring the roof, and it was extremely hot over there, and it does tie up education for months at a time. We can say, we have just a few days, but it's a lot more than a few days that we're looking at, and other schools are moving to air conditioning, and I know the cost, and I understand, but you guys have done phenomenal work. But I at least wanted to register that air conditioning is really an important factor in the living environment. It really is. And when I was here, the office was done, and later on they did a biology lab. Tom Gillette, who was down there at the time. But it was hot, really hot. And I don't know how much you said air conditioning they had to it. Did you come up with a figure of it where both buildings, 3 buildings?
It was.
It's about 200,000 for the.
The estimate they gave us was 1.056 million for
Is that all 3 buildings?
no, that's one building.
I said 200,000. The middle school, right there.
No, that was the amount to switch from the main one chiller for the entire building. If you went to the individual units within each room, which is what Spencer has stated preference for, it adds $200,000 just to make that transition.
I understand everything you're saying. I just wanted to cost and everything. But I just wanted to register the idea that how important, if you're a classroom teacher,
so
how important that is.
So what I would say is that, as we look at our safety fund, we need to, it's over 10 years, 3 mills, a little over $5 million over those 10 years. Our property values, the revenue generated has gone up some, but we're going to have a number that will tell us how much we're going to generate over those 10 years. But we have to also make sure that we have money each year that we use out of that we have available for things that go on during that year. So we can't commit all of that to projects. And so that's why I'm working on looking at things like the parking lots and other recurring things that come up that we know we're going to need to deal with, and making sure we have a certain amount of money set aside. And then with what we feel like we can dedicate to projects, then we can use those funds combined with the ESSER funds. We can look at the entire package, how far can we get? What can we do with the funds that we have? That's why we had the building and site committee to look at what is the priority, what things absolutely need to be done. If you didn't address the piping, in the high school, you could do the air conditioning in the middle school. But what happens if the piping is? So we have to address priorities, and then we'll see where the funding lies. We do have the potential that the government in a number of areas is expanding money for education. And The governor recently announced an increase in funding is in her plan for this year. We don't know what that's gonna look like. It might involve some money for construction. It might be more than just general fund. It might be, we're gonna help schools with construction because there are a lot of schools like us that are in need for construction. The federal government, I've been talking with Sarah, there is some money in the infrastructure bill that was passed. There is some money for construction in schools. However, when we looked at it just briefly, a lot of it is tied into things like buying buses that run on electricity and things like, it's all green energy things. So I don't know how much would apply to what we want to do, but there are other possibilities that we might have to be able to allow us to move forward with those things. All we can do is take the money that we have and work on our priorities and see if we can get to that.
I'm not, I should say that I'm really excited about the project that we're doing. And I understand the rationale for not doing air conditioning. I just wanted to register the fact that it is a priority, maybe not as high a priority as other things you have, for teachers and students in the building. And I trust you, Chris. I know you'll do the best you can and won't be forgotten. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to at least express my feelings about it. Thank you.
Is this document that we read over, is this what they have given you then, or is it?
Yeah.
My question, I guess, is it a fluid document that we can make any changes to if necessary?
We could make changes to it, yes.
Is there actually a couple of edits that need to happen with spelling and punctuation?
Okay.
Sorry.
Talking about the 24-page.
Art.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Art.
Yeah, I read through it. I read through it a couple times. I didn't read through it for spelling and punctuation.
It's okay, that's
I
just
have
me.
I have a spelling and punctuation person that
It's just
keeps
a
me
jam.
on my toes.
It's a couple
So
things, but-
we will before it gets posted, we'll look through it again.
Right.
And I will also look at boosting the HVAC as a bigger priority.
So one of the things that was in it was on page 12, number 5, talks about things being held in confidence if necessary and being exempted from FOIA. Do those necessities need to be written into this RFP? Because it just says if I didn't even say if necessary, it was said it kind of generally. Let me get to it. Page
Falls under exemption.
5. It just says after a selected contractor has been identified, all proposals shall be subject to Michigan Freedom of Information Act unless information thereof falls under exemption. We need to put in there that it needs to be identified that it falls under an exemption? Or like?
I don't think so, because
Okay.
I don't think any of it would fall under
Okay,
an exemption. I think there are very few exceptions.
okay. I just want to double check and make sure.
Yeah.
And then my other question was for the pre-proposal meeting and also opening of bids, do we need to have board representation at that? Or is that just something that like you and Sarah would do?
That's something we can do.
Okay.
Not an equal order.
I wasn't sure, it didn't really outline
It's
it.
basically just- They get opened up, they get announced, so that people are aware of what they are, and then meetings. That's all it is.
Great. That was my only questions. Anyone have anything else?
So we're supposed to approve this when?
The RFP I would put out, and then when we get the bids and everything back, it'll be in.
We don't need to vote on the RFP.
You don't have to vote on the RFP, no. Oh, it's not necessary.
Discussion done.
Moving on. All right, our next item is, for discussion, is superintendent evaluation planning. The board and superintendent will discuss timeline and key dates, performance goals, appropriate benchmarks, and artifacts to be used to evidence superintendent performance. So Chris and I had discussed this. We still feel like we can have some of this as general meeting discussion. However, if we discuss things here in public time, we need to only direct our comments to district goals and questions regarding the timeline or the tool that we'll be using. Anything that is personally related to Chris's performance needs to wait until closed session to be discussed. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone was clear on that. Is there anything that you would like to have generally discussed regarding the evaluation plan? Seeing none, we would be going into closed session for the purpose of discussing the performance. And because the only thing left after closed session will be public comment, I'm actually going to move public comment up to this part of the meeting before we go into closed session. So that way when we come back out, all we'll have left to do is adjourn the meeting. So at this time, let's look at public comment. This is the section of the meeting in which the public may make comments or share their opinions about Union City Community Schools. We ask you to limit your comments to no longer than 5 minutes per person to allow others the opportunity to speak. This is an opportunity for the board to listen to your concerns. It is not board practice to act on the concerns voiced during this meeting to allow for the board to do further research. Do you have any public comments?
Check. Only if I hold it. Okay. Take good one. Paragraph 3. My comment was about the bid for the restroom building there. I've been involved in a lot of construction projects lately in the last 5 years. That seems like astronomical for just the bathroom. Does the Career Center still have a program for building trades? That might be something to look at as a community project for that building. Or hopefully they come in a lot lower. Maybe they're just trying to cover all the bases. But at buildings with 2 or 3 stalls, men's and women's included, with a lot more square footage attached to it, yeah, that would.
I think you guys got that.
Any other public comment? If not, I will entertain a motion to go into closed session for the discussion of superintendent.
So moved.
All right. All right, Aaron. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Motion carries. We're going to go into closed session at this point. And if anyone needs a bio break, please.